Alicia, okay, I think we're here. Should we get started?
We do have a quorum. Everybody's present.
Great, thank you. So first I make this meeting announcement. Pursuant to the governor's executive orders, which waived certain Brown Act meeting requirements, including any requirements to make a physical meeting location available to the public, and most recently the March 19, 2020 executive order, which ordered all residents to stay at home. As such, the Las Virgenes-Malibu Council of Governments will provide members of the public the opportunity to view and participate in the meeting remotely using Zoom. To join the Zoom meeting, it's https://zoom.us/j/4714-103-699, meeting ID 471-410-3699. If anybody did not get that and wants to be on this meeting, they can contact Terry at LVMCOG.org. A public agenda packet is available on the COG's website, LVMCOG.org. Members of the public who wish to comment on matters before the governing board have two options. One, make comments limited to 3 minutes during the public comment period, or two, submit an email a written comment limited to 1,000 characters to Terry at LVMCOG.org no later than 12 p.m. on Monday, September 14th, 2020. The email address will remain open during the meeting for providing public comment during the meeting. Emails received during the meeting will be read out loud at the appropriate time during the meeting, provided they are received before the board takes action on an item or can be read during general public comment. For any questions regarding the virtual meeting, please contact Terry at LVMCOG.org. Calling this meeting of the Las Virgenes-Malibu Council of Governments Governing Board meeting to order on September 15, 2020, 8:30 a.m. I'm going to take a roll call. Kelly Honig. Is that an aye? Okay. Karen Farrar from Malibu.
Here.
Stuart Siegel. Hilden.
Present.
Alicia Weintraub, Calabasas.
Here.
And I'm Illece Buckley Weber from Agoura Hills, and I'm here, so we have a quorum. If I can get a motion and a second to approve today's agenda.
So moved by Stuart.
Second by Alicia.
Thank you. All in favor, I'll run through the list. Kelly Honig. Kelly, is that an aye?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Karen Farrar.
Yes.
Stuart Siegel.
Yes.
Alicia Weintraub.
Yes.
And Illece Buckley Weber, aye. So that's 5-0. The agenda has been approved. Let's move forward to public comment period. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54954.2. The governing board is prohibited from discussing or taking immediate action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated that the item is of an emergency nature or the need to take action arose subsequent to the posting of the agenda. So let's move, I guess, Mr. Dibble, do we have any public comments?
I have not received any email, telephone, any public comments.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the consent calendar.
You might want to check and see if there's anybody online that is a member of the public that wants to say something.
Okay, do we have any members of the public that would like to testify at this point? If you do, unmute yourself and jump right in. I don't see anybody. I see one phone number that I don't recognize. A 213 number, 793-1274. Is that anybody who wants to speak? They're unmuted, so I'm going to assume that they would jump in if they want to. Okay, so
hello, this is Maria Chong-Castillo. I'm with Supervisor Sheila Kill.
oh, hi, Maria. Okay, no problem. So let's move on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items will be approved in one motion unless removed for separate discussion of action. Do I have any board members who wanted to remove any of the consent items? Seeing none, No hands. I'm going to move on that the two items on the consent calendar are: one, approval of July 21, 2020 and August 3, 2020 draft meeting notes, and they've been attached. And the second item is the September 2020 financial statement. It's also attached. So if I don't have any discussion, if I can get a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
Moved.
From Kelly, Honig, and Westlake. Do I have a second?
Second from
by
Alicia.
Stewart.
Okay, I got a second from Alicia. Thank you. So all in favor, let's start with Kelly Honig, Westlake Village.
Aye.
Karen Farrar, Malibu.
Yes.
Stuart Siegel, Hidden Hills.
Yes.
Alicia Weintraub, Calabasas.
Yes.
And Elise Buckley Weber, Agoura Hills. Aye. So the consent, we have a 5-0 vote. So the consent calendar has been approved for those two items. So now we're going to move on to information items. And I know that I saw Assembly Member Irwin on the line. So why don't we start with her? Welcome. You're muted, Jackie.
All right, hang on one second. Thank you for inviting me today. I had that I was supposed to talk for a few minutes and then open it up for questions, and I am really more interested in what it is that you're interested in, but let me just give you a little brief idea of what happened in the legislature this year. I'm sure many of you followed it. We were, as I had mentioned before, we were sent home in March, and we came back, and we had to cut the number of bills that we were carrying. And in the end, it was truly chaos with fights between the Senate and the Assembly and the governor. And a lot of bills ended up dying on the floor or not getting back at the right time. So I think probably for you, the biggest interest is, I would imagine, is the Atkins bill, which would have allowed subdivisions without anything more than administrative approval. And to me, that was a really huge policy shift. It's basically getting rid of single family zoning, and it really, I think it needed much more of a discussion. It did pass the Assembly floor, but it passed late, so it didn't get back to the Senate in time, so that one didn't pass. Scott Wiener also had a homeless shelter bill, which would take away some of the local control over where shelters would be placed, and I think that one's on the governor's desk now. So a lot of issues with housing, and interestingly, and of course you understand why that is. We did not get many cities calling us and having concern with the Atkins bill. And that was really surprising, and I think that's why it passed so easily on the floor. We didn't have a whole bunch of engagement, and to me, I would think council members would be very concerned with losing control over zoning like that. And in some ways, it's almost throwing the general plan out the window. But also have heard from Thousand Oaks concerned that they would not be able to finish their housing element in time, and had asked for to see if we could do some legislation for a 6-month extension. I talked to David Chu, who heads the housing committee, and they haven't heard from many cities that it's going to be a problem. This is SCAG, I think, is later on in the schedule. But some of the other cities are going to be having to have updated housing elements, I think, starting in April. The real concern with Thousand Oaks is that there hadn't been enough public input. And then I also heard from some of you about the the recycling bill. And there was obviously a lot of engagement on that. And when it first came into the Assembly, I did support it. But I think there wasn't enough time to really sort out all the issues. It had taken significant amendments and never gone through any committees. It was actually on the inactive file till 2 weeks before the end of session. So even though we all want to get rid of plastics in the environment and make sure that we look at recycling, it's a much more complicated issue. CalRecycle has not done a good job with what they're responsible for at this point. They haven't had leadership there for the last 6 months. And I think there was a lot more work that needed to be done on that bill. I do have a bill on the governor's desk on recycling. It's a bill that I did with Phil Ting, and that this bill has been attempted for the last 4 years and died somewhere along the way each year. But this year we think that we have a very good chance of having the governor sign, because we were able to work with all the opposition, and basically we are requiring that all plastic bottles have 50% recycled content by 2030. That will be the highest standard in the world. And we have the manufacturers that were in agreement that they're going to make that effort. And the reason that that's so important is we really need to make sure that we have markets for plastics. Because otherwise you're going to end up with what we have with a lot of the other plastics, that they're basically, everybody thinks they're recycling when they put plastics in their recycling can, but most of them end up in the landfills. So a lot of other work also done on police reform. And I was able to get a bill passed that with Autumn Burke that is looking at pre-employment, making sure that you downplay militarization of the police department, and also look at the psych exam, which has not significantly been changed for the last 40 years, to determine if somebody has implicit or explicit bias that would prevent them from doing their job. So a lot of other chaos going on, but those are some of the highlights from this legislative year. In the district, we've been working very hard. My staff has, I always say they have PTSD from dealing with all the EDD claims, because EDD, as I'm sure many of you know, is has been really performing suboptimally. And the kind of they've been doing a very good job, and we've seen some improvement, but it really a lot of our constituents are suffering. Finally, I've been working with a very large group in the county on antibody testing, and we were able to test in 1 2-week period 6,000 people, but overall 14,000 people. And we just published some of the results. It's UCI, UCLA, and CLU, that in the county there's 1% seroprevalence, but in Latinos it's actually 2%. And then we over-tested seniors and farm workers to look at what's happening in those communities. The people that tested positive, we asked them if they wanted to be, if they were willing to be tested once a month. So we have a cohort of about 50 people that just had their second tests, and they still have the antibodies, and there's with only a slight decline. So some of the results are going to be published, and hopefully that will give us, will add to the pool of knowledge that we have about COVID. So lots going on, and a lot of uncertainty, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about specific areas of interest.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your 2 bills getting passed, and hopefully they'll be signed. I have a quick question. What did you mean by looking at the militarization on the pre-employment for police reform?
Well, so there's been a lot of, if you look at some of the advertising when police departments and sheriff's departments are recruiting, a lot of it shows a high level of militarization as they're trying to recruit, let's say, veterans or people that have just left the military. So kind of upplaying that kind of military look. And so it's just rethinking that. I am the chair of the Veterans Committee, so we wanted to make sure that there is still an effort to continue to recruit veterans, but we want to move away from this kind of war stance that you see in some of the recruitment materials.
Thank you. So I see Kelly Honig, Mayor Honig is raising her hand. Why don't you go ahead? Questions for Assembly Member Irwin?
Hi, Jackie.
Hey, Kelly.
More of a comment. You know, I was a big proponent of 54, the recycling bill that you just spoke about. Just a comment going forward. You know, I think that the answer is in the sourcing, not in the recycling. You know, I agree that Cal Recycle is, I mean, basically we're not recycling, you know, because there's no market for it. So I just, you know, encourage you and the assembly to approach it from a sourcing. You know, we can't get rid of the plastic once it's been produced, so we need to not produce it. And that's
Right.
that's my just my comment for the day.
Yeah, and Kelly, I would really agree with you. But part of, I think, with the plastic bottles, that is a very good cycle that you can do there. You can continue to, you know, use that for multiple generations. But with plastics, there was an article out recently, I think from NPR, and it really talked about most plastic really cannot be recycled. It degrades so much after 2 generations that it's been somewhat of a false narrative by the oil companies that this was a material that could be recycled. So we really do need to look at replacements for plastic. You're absolutely right. The bottles are a little bit easier because that's that's really obvious, and getting to 50%. That requirement, it moves, because there's a requirement, it moves away from buying completely virgin plastic, which ends up being much cheaper than recycled plastic. But it's a very complicated situation. A lot of what we were talking about with proponents of the bill is, you know, figuring out how to recycle, you know, plastic salad bags, for instance, that are very difficult because they're double layered to keep fruits and vegetables fresh for twice as long. You know, at a certain point, you're ending up producing more carbon in trying to recycle than you are in recycling these bags, but there's no replacement for it yet. And so, if you know, what are you going to do with fruits and vegetables that now are going to last 4 days instead of 12 days? So it just takes a lot of thinking through. And I think that a lot of, I mean, I think you have a very good understanding of what's going on. A lot of people were really upset. They got messages from, you know, different organizations, different NGOs, and I think they didn't understand. You can't just say, okay, now we are going to recycle everything, and that it happens like that. There has to be infrastructure put in place. There has to be, I mean, a lot of resources put toward that effort, and it doesn't just happen that easily. And again, for me, in this year with COVID, to not have any hearings when the bill had been completely amended was really problematic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And yes, I did recently find out, not recently, but that the actual process of recycling is very carbon intensive. Right. So it's somewhat self-defeating. So
yeah,
it's like you said, it's like you said. So thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions for Assembly Member Irwin? Nobody? Laura McCorkindale.
Hi, Assemblywoman Irwin. How are you? Laura McCorkindale from the City of Hidden Hills. Nice to meet you.
You too.
I was very surprised to hear you open by saying that you didn't hear from any cities on 1120 and the other housing bills, because we were working pretty hard.
You know, I shouldn't, we didn't hear from them, because of COVID. What happened was the League of Cities received a whole bunch of letters, and they sent them to everybody. So people got hundreds of emails, but the staff, they don't pass on emails that are not from constituents. And so I think the most effective way really is a lot of you have, and that was very special to this year. So we didn't get a whole bunch of letters from constituents. And again, I wasn't going to support it because I did get personal like text messages. If you have relationships with your representatives, reaching out personally or would have been very effective. The emails ended up, we know they were sent out, but most of my colleagues said that they didn't hear anything. So that's what we determined, is that they weren't sent specifically to the legislators from in the district. So how are you communicating?
Well, City of Hidden Hills hired a lobbyist who I think also reached out to I think all the representatives' offices in the region, and I'm also part of a group of California Alliance of Electeds, which is made up of mayors and council people from around the state who had a fairly tireless campaign on these housing bills. So I just was surprised to hear you say that, but I want to thank you for abstaining on 1120. And I hope that going forward, maybe we can have talks in the fall before these bills are reconstructed, so that everybody who is representing this region can understand the kind of obvious problems we have with these bills for this particular region, from an environmental standpoint, from a wildfire standpoint, from a housing needs standpoint, and basically just from a one-size-fits-all doesn't really make sense for California anymore. And I think we'd like to have some more nuanced and substantial conversations to help you guys oppose the bills on our behalf.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I was now I think Henry was the only Democrat that voted against it. So maybe you were able to contact him. This was my real frustration with this legislative session, is that the normal ways of reaching out to legislators didn't always work. And so I was just shocked that when Robert Rivas said he was doing the vote counts and they had enough votes for the bill, I was shocked. I was shocked because if we really would have been listening to local officials, we would have known, just like you said, that it's a one-size-fits-all. And the interesting thing with 1120 is one side was saying, the pro side was saying that anybody that was opposed was racist because you're basically continuing this redlining. You don't want multifamily or less expensive housing in expensive neighborhoods. But then you had Sydney Comlager-Dove, who represents portions of LA, and she said it was racist on the other side. And because she said what's going to happen is that initially all the building is going to go into, she's concerned about African-American lower income communities as opposed to the wealthier communities, because those are the obvious ones to create density. And for African-Americans, 50% are homeowners, and they have been able to really build up some wealth through their homes. And now you're doing something that could potentially downgrade the neighborhood. That was her view. So it was very strange being on the assembly floor and hearing the two sides calling each other racist. My concern really was that initially, this is not necessarily in the next 2 decades going to increase density substantially in areas like Camarillo, but it is going to in areas like Oxnard and Hueneme. And they've already told me they have problems with the ADU bills, that there's too much density and not enough infrastructure to support these ADUs that are now that they're able to just build in their, that anybody can build. The yards aren't big enough. So I think if now we're allowing subdivisions, it's first going to happen in the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods that, exactly where you don't want it to happen, because there's a lot of density there already. So it should have had, as you said, a much more nuanced discussion. But I will, if for whatever groups you were involved with, please let them know that most of my colleagues did not hear anything. And you can see by how easily that bill passed. If they would have heard from local electeds and, specifically pointed out the issues with infrastructure, and really that it's the locals that can best decide where you put additional density, I don't think it would have passed. Now, again, it turns out the clock was run out because there were all sorts of fights between the houses, but definitely start early and make sure that you're heard at every hearing, because I think this is a huge change to be doing in a year like this.
Major piece of policy that would have changed the face of California. So we found that a lot of people we met with had not read the bill. A lot of legislators had not read the bill. And that was incredibly disconcerting considering the magnitude of it. The amount of people that thought it was an ADU bill.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but I really appreciate the feedback, and I'll take that back to everyone, and lovely to meet you. Thanks again for the abstaining.
Thank you.
And
I abstain.
Go ahead.
I abstain because it's a soft no. I would never. It's still a no. Yeah.
So, Assemblywoman, how do we go about making our voice heard? Because I know we did send letters and emails, and now I'm hearing it's quite surprising. I agree with Laura. So, you actually want us to text you?
Oh, the cities, Camarillo, TO, they send me text messages. Now,
Okay.
but I also, I was obviously on a city council, and so especially with TO, I'm always very close with the city manager and the city attorney and the council members. So yes, I think it's really, you need to, if you have that type of relationship with your legislator, that's what you need to do, and you need to encourage. I actually even called Claudia and I said, call the league and tell them whatever they're doing is not effective, because nobody is hearing anything. So emails directly to the legislator of your district, because otherwise they just get thrown out. And I have to say, and I don't know if you have somebody from the league on, they need to figure out how to better communicate in this sort of environment. And I think it's the personal contact that would have made the difference for a lot of other members. That, there's other bills a few years ago where when you start to hear from all your mayors and council members, then you take note.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions for Assemblywoman Irwin? And then I see go ahead, Rob, the city manager of Westlake Village.
Hi, Jackie. Good to see you. Yeah, there's an interesting, discussion we're having about advocacy as well as cities. There's 5 cities in a COG. I think every city in our COG is engaged in one level of advocacy or opposing bills. Westlake Village is getting a little more interested in this and considering our own legislative platform. But my question is, right now we sort of have every city advocating sort of independently as cities. Do we have a greater voice when we agree as 5 cities to communicate as a COG to those legislative representatives? Is that more effective? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think doing it individually and as a COG would be very effective, but you do have to take that step back. I mean, I represent you and Henry represents you, and on that specific bill, both of us voted no or we abstained. So you are at least able to affect those 2 votes. For Jesse, who I think Jesse and Richard, who represent the rest of you, Jesse represents the Valley, and I'm not sure how he voted on that one, but I think Richard voted no also. He had, and I know that the reason, or he stayed off of it. Am I correct?
Yes.
I abstained and Richard voted no.
Okay, you have, so you have been, I think your COG has been effective. Richard has been so pro-housing, and he's stayed off of it because he heard more on this bill than he's heard on any bill ever. So, so yes, it's effective as a COG. but when you look at your representatives and I think it shows that whatever you did worked there, but it was, I really think, a lot of other people that didn't understand what was going on. If you went to Jesse, I'm sure he would understand what the bill did.
Great. We look forward to hearing from him next. Jeff, I saw you raise your hand. I think you want to comment.
Yeah, this is Jeff Kiernan with the League of Cities. I think Assemblymember, you're on an iPad and probably didn't see me, but I just wanted to mention, we've had a lot of discussion about SB 1120. And one of the reasons why you weren't hearing from the League is because we were, at the end of the day, neutral on that bill. That's why, our policy committee and our board took a look at that bill, and much to the chagrin of many of the cities in my region, we had a support if amended position, which ultimately moved to a neutral position on that bill. That's one of the reasons why you weren't hearing from the League on that bill, because we felt like we had negotiated in good faith with the pro tem and other members, Senator Wiener, and at the end of the day, we weren't able to get to a no on that legislation. So I just wanted to know
so that would make sense then. That would make sense why we didn't hear from the League. But was it? I guess the issue with all the emails going to legislators that didn't represent the constituents. Did the League have something to do with that?
I have not heard that yet. That's the first I've heard of it. So if anyone else has information on that, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised about that, but that you can see in this area that it wasn't going over too well.
No, and I think a lot of our members were disappointed at the end of the day that it did not, that because we didn't get our amendments, that we went to neutral instead of opposed. And I know that that's been a discussion internally and with a lot of our members. So there's a little bit of a reckoning on that bill for sure.
Yeah, and I have to say the one other difficulty is that it was the pro tem's bill. So it went through the Senate with, pretty easily. And then, like I said, there really weren't enough. Something like that, that's such a change in policy, really needs to have, to me, there needs to be more hearing and there needs to be more input.
Well, and I can go back to the background and let the council members speak, but I would be interested in hearing from you and the other legislators about what you think actually can pass on housing, because SB 50 and SB 1120 both failed. As the pro tem,
SB 1120 didn't fail.
Well, true, but it failed for lack of interaction between the houses, I think.
Right. But that was not. It did not fail for lack of votes. But I do think that a lot of my colleagues didn't understand what was in it. So I don't know if maybe that was the whole reason for rushing through. But when I brought it up to colleagues, they were unaware of what an incredible change of policy this would be.
Thank you. Any last questions for Assemblywoman Irwin before we move on to Assemblymember Gabriel? I am not seeing any. So thank you so much, Jackie, for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Fascinating what you're telling us. So it's important that you come speak to us whenever we can get you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's now move on to Assemblymember Gabriel.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Some of you I've known since high school, and some of you I've met more recently, and some of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before. So I'm Jesse Gabriel, represent the 45th Assembly District, which is mostly the West San Fernando Valley. I also have the privilege of representing the cities of Calabasas and Hidden Hills, and so it's nice to see the mayor and the council members from some of those cities on as well. I have an assembly district that's roughly 500,000 people. About 25,000 of them live in Hidden Hills and Calabasas, and the rest are mostly in the city of Los Angeles. So it's a very interesting district to represent. I can have a morning event in Calabasas at the senior center and then drive 15 minutes to Reseda and be at an elementary school where 90% of the students are on free and reduced lunches. So we have a district that's very diverse. Lots of different needs and interests, and we try very faithfully to represent all of the folks that we're privileged to to represent in Sacramento. I wanted to just take a moment and introduce my district director, Catherine, who's on, as well as Rebecca Bruckman, who just joined our office. I think this is like her third or fourth day, so we're really glad to have both of them on, and I hope you'll feel free to be in touch with all of them. As Jackie mentioned, and Jackie, it's good to see you. Jackie and I are part of the same workout crew in Sacramento, where we go. We used to, back when it was safe and legal, go spinning in the morning, and then go out and eat a really big unhealthy breakfast and pat ourselves on the back. But now we're doing outdoor walks. I think a lot of what she said really rings true for me. It was a very challenging year in the legislature with all of the dynamics with COVID. A once in a century public health crisis that precipitated an economic crisis of extraordinary magnitude. We lost more jobs in 3 months than we lost in 26 months during the Great Recession. And so as the Assembly Member Irwin mentioned, I mean, just an extraordinary number of Californians filing for unemployment, the EDD system being overwhelmed. Also had a budget crisis. We went from a $6 billion projected surplus to a $54 billion deficit in 3 months. So as all of you can imagine, a lot of hard work going to try to understand how we can meet the deficit and responsibly balance our budget. As you know, of course, unlike Washington, D.C., we can't print money and we have to balance our budget. And then, of course, this very interesting national conversation about race and justice that certainly resonated in Sacramento. And that was all on top of the stuff that we had when we came into the year, right? Of concern about wildfires, about housing and homelessness, about a public education system that's failing too many people. So a very, very complicated year in Sacramento with a lot to deal with. Really proud of our team. We had 4 bills that are sitting on the governor's desk. So we're waiting awaiting action on those. My top priorities that I ran on and work in office are things related to housing and homelessness, which is just become an extraordinary challenge in the West San Fernando Valley. A lot of you represent communities that I think are differently situated, but if you've been into the Valley recently or into the city of LA, you know that our homelessness challenge has just exploded. 16% increase for the second year in a row in the county of Los Angeles, more than 66,000 people who are experiencing homelessness in the county, and it's something I hear about really every single day from folks in my district, and so that's a top issue for us. Also work on issues related to higher education, have a bill on the governor's desk that would help homeless students keep their federal financial aid. And then issues related to gun violence are something that Jackie and I have worked on a lot together. So have a bill that would allow the state to recognize out-of-state gun violence restraining orders. If a judge in Nevada has said that you shouldn't have firearms because you pose an immediate threat of harm to yourself or others, then you certainly shouldn't have them in the state of California. And we've seen, unfortunately, as we saw with Gilroy, that oftentimes gun violence can cross state lines and our communities can be at risk. So we felt, it was a somewhat productive legislative session for our team, but obviously felt, there were some big bills there, including the plastics bill, some things related to wildfires, a number of other things that didn't make it across the finish line at the end of session, and that's unfortunate. So certainly a really full agenda for us when we go back next year on a lot of these issues. In terms of 1120, because that certainly seems to be a topic of interest, I abstained, which I'll say, I say it slightly differently than Jackie. I say it's a polite no. What I have learned in Sacramento is that I'm one of 120 people. And so it's often better to abstain than vote no, because you're going to have to turn around 5 minutes after you vote no on somebody's bill and go ask them to sign a budget letter for something in your community, to vote for one of your bills, to join you in something that you're trying to do. Abstained for a lot of the same reasons that Jackie did. I thought the bill wasn't totally baked. I think it's a pretty significant policy change that deserved a little bit more robust debate. I would have liked to see some guardrails built into it around environmental issues. And I'm not entirely sure that was the kind of step that was appropriate to take, really a leap forward without more robust discussion. What I will say is I do think that bill is going to pass next year, some version of it. I know that that's not what folks on this call may want to hear, but when I decided to venture off into politics 2 years ago, decided that it was always important to me to be straight up with folks, even if it wasn't what they wanted to hear. So, that bill passed 39-0 in the state Senate. It passed pretty easily on our floor. I had some conversations with Robert Rivas, who was the jockey. I think he had a couple votes in his back pocket on that bill. And the only reason that it didn't make it to the governor's desk is because of some last minute, really the shot clock ran out. But I think you should expect a version of that bill to come back next year. And I suspect that it will probably pretty easily pass the legislature. So I think the most important thing for all of us to do is engage constructively and try to shape that proposal in a way that will work for the diverse communities across California. Appreciated very much the engagement that I had. I got a really thoughtful letter from the city of Calabasas, got my text message from Mayor Weintraub, and so appreciate her leadership very much, and then had the opportunity to hop on a Zoom with Councilwoman McCorkindale and Councilmember Siegel, and we also got some text messages from the other council members in Hidden Hills. It's something that I struggled with though, because got a lot of opposition from certain parts of my district, but then also tremendous support for that bill from other folks that I represent. I had a Zoom with some other constituents who were literally crying on the Zoom about our housing crisis and begging me to support that and other housing bills. So, it's always a challenge to represent a district where there's a diversity of opinions, and we certainly heard that on this legislation. And I suspect one of the reasons that the bill enjoyed such support and such broad bipartisan support is because a lot of California, looks more like Reseda than it does like Calabasas. I mean, you all are very privileged to represent some cities that function extraordinarily well with an amazing quality of life. I should mention I have even though only 25,000 out of the 500,000 people that I represent are part of the COG, certainly have a soft spot for this group. I grew up in the Conejo Valley. My parents still live out there. They're very reliable Jackie Irwin voters. So I feel a lot of connection to the Conejo Valley, to the Las Virgenes area. And certainly your perspective is important to me, but just be aware that for other communities across the state, they look at the housing and homeless crisis very, very differently, and feel it in a very real way. And I can tell you, I mean, really without fail, at every public meeting I've had in the Valley, at every event that I do, somebody comes up to me and asks me, what are we doing about the homelessness crisis? What are we doing about the housing crisis? And the backdrop for all of you that probably some of you are aware of is that a lot of folks have lost confidence in the city of Los Angeles to address the issue, right? I mean, setting aside even the issues of corruption that they've, exposed around development, people in the West Valley come up to me and they're really frustrated with the lack of progress that they see on these issues. And a lot of them, the sense that I get is, look, I voted twice to tax myself, right? I voted for Measure H at the county level, for Proposition HHH at the city level. I've said to the government, take more of my resources and go solve this problem. And yet they're seeing the problem accelerate dramatically. So, I get a lot of pressure, certainly in my district. Folks aren't necessarily interested in just having the city of Los Angeles respond to these issues. They'd like the state to take a more active role. And that's certainly a sentiment that we hear a lot. On that point, one of the bills that I have now sitting on the governor's desk, and really proud actually that all four of them passed with bipartisan support, is a bill that would build in stronger accountability around state and local homelessness funding. There's a lot of folks who said, look, we're devoting an extraordinary amount of resources to housing and homelessness, and yet we're seeing very little return on investment. And so I'm someone who believes in data-driven policymaking, who thinks accountability and transparency are really important. And so we authored a bill that would bring, I think, a lot more transparency and light to the process, so we can decide which of these programs work and are worth our investment and are worthy of investing taxpayer resources in, and which ones need to be improved. Because I think there are a lot of programs and initiatives where the state is pouring money into them that aren't necessarily demonstrating the ROI that we would expect, and that we ought to be devoting taxpayer resources to. So really appreciate the opportunity to engage with all of you. This is, I sort of just finished up my first term in the legislature. I had I was elected in a special election, so I had a little red shirt year, kind of like, I guess, when I did pre-K. So I got a few months before my first term. But just finishing up my first term was a tremendous learning experience. So grateful for the partnership from Assemblymember Irwin. She does a great job representing your communities, and really, really grateful for the leadership in Calabasas. I think Mayor Weintraub has just done an extraordinary job and so appreciate the partnership there on all these issues. And, you know, the Woolsey fire was a really sort of, I guess, trial by fire. I've never said that before, for my experience in government, and you know, getting to work with the great electeds in Calabasas certainly made that easier, and appreciate the opportunity to get to know the folks in Hidden Hills more. So looking forward to more conversation, more partnership. I know, saying to Mayor Weber, Buckley Weber, I know we got your letter opposing 1120, and even though I don't represent the city of Agoura Hills, you know, that means something to me. And so just even though I don't represent a lot of the cities on this that are part of this COG, certainly want to invite you to reach out, to be in touch. I think local electeds play a extraordinary important role in the process, and we are always, you know, eager to hear your feedback and to have conversations with you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And that was going to be my question to you, was whether or not it was worthwhile for you to hear from a city you don't represent. And you've answered that. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Assemblymember Gabriel?
Yeah, this is Stuart Siegel. I was making a couple of comments.
Go
Jesse,
right ahead.
good morning.
Good morning, Stuart. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to reaffirm a couple of things. One, you will be hearing from us. Laura and I are full on. The lack of attention and forceful, aggressive action, particularly on 1120, was deafening. That the sound of silence. And sorry to you, Jeff, but the league really let us down as far as I'm concerned. We, as a tiny city, are going to be devoting a substantial part of our budget to lobbying and aggressive action. We need to protect the way of life, and we need to protect the reason that we live in these areas, and we don't have to apologize. We're not racist. I don't care what that attitude is. It has got to do with quality of life, and that shouldn't be questioned. And this racist term being thrown around is, as Jackie said, it becomes meaningless when both sides are calling each other names. It's got nothing to do with that. And we could get into the nuts and bolts of it, but we're not going to. But I just want to assure you and Jackie, and I'm not sure who else is on this call, that we're going to be proactively educating and nudging gently to keep the quality of our lives. So thank you for joining us on the call today.
I just wanted,
Thank you,
sorry,
sir.
Jesse.
Go ahead.
Please, Mayor, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you. You know, we've always had an open line of communication between you and with Catherine. So I wanted to thank you for that from the city of Calabasas, and just also wanted to further express our displeasure with the league for their stance on the bill. I think there's very few things that will really, as Stuart said, change the fabric of our communities. And I think that's why this bill really, you heard it from all different types of communities in LA County, just the negative benefits of this bill. But we'll continue to work with you and your staff as we continue to deal with the housing crisis. I mean, in our own community, I say this time and time again, it's not that we can't get affordable housing built, we can't even get market rate housing built. So there's a bigger issue that we need to deal with, and it's not just in this bill. But just wanted to thank you for the open line of communication, especially during COVID. I think our offices have just worked tremendously together. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Weintraub. Mayor, go right ahead. Go ahead, Mayor Honig.
Thanks, Illece. Hi, Jesse. I'm Kelly Honig, the mayor of Westlake Village. So I have a question on 1120, you know, the lot dividing bill, which is what I call it in my head. In a community like mine, or in Agoura Hills, or in Calabasas, how exactly is 1120 going to provide housing that's affordable? I understand there might be more houses if you took my house and put 2 houses on the lot in my neighborhood. I get that, but given the price of homes in our Conejo area, how exactly is that going to be affordable for anybody other than just an increase in quantity? I don't understand that. I've never understood that about 1120, and I perceive that as a major fault in that bill. I've had conversations with Laura, and it's just not, it doesn't make sense to me. So maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. Again, remember, I didn't vote for the bill, but let me see if I can share with you some of what I heard and some of the arguments the proponents were making, so you can think about them. And Councilwoman McCorkindale and I got to have this conversation at length, and she's done a great job both through email and Facebook and Zoom of sharing her thoughts with me. So I'm looking forward to more of those conversations. So the theory behind the bill is that California has a severe housing crisis. I think that's something that has broad bipartisan acceptance up in Sacramento. And what's striking about housing in the capital is it's not a partisan issue. It's not at all divided by partisanship. It often has to do with region and geography and the communities that you represent. So the argument here is that a lot of the work that the state has done around affordable housing has focused on subsidy, right? You either use the low-income housing tax credit to develop deed-restricted affordable housing, you help to build supportive housing, other things like that. That is, one, tremendously expensive, and two, it's going to be impossible for us to subsidize our way out of this crisis given the deficit in home construction that we face and also the number of folks that are homeless. So the theory behind the ADU bills, behind this bill and others, is that they create what's referred to as naturally occurring affordable housing that does not require subsidy. So one of the things that I had to balance in thinking about this bill is, I live in Encino. The economics make no sense. No one's going to buy my house, knock it down, and put up 2 homes or put up a duplex. There's just no demand for that. The economics don't make sense. No one's going to make money doing that. The money is going to be in the opposite, which is knocking down my house and putting up a much bigger, fancier house. So I don't actually think that this bill, even if it were to pass, would broadly impact huge portions of my district. I think it's just as a function of how the market operates, unlikely to happen. What I do think is that in other parts of the state, as Assemblywoman Irwin mentioned, this is more likely to have an impact in some other communities. People are going to put up smaller homes. These are going to become starter homes for young people who are looking to, enjoy the benefits of home ownership. There's going to be some duplexes going to go up, and that is going to be what's referred to again as naturally occurring affordable housing. So in Westlake Village, where my parents live, again, the economics aren't going to work. If you did put up 2 houses on a lot, neither of those houses is going to be affordable. They're going to be really expensive, beautiful homes. So again, part of what I struggle with, and I think, with my district and also with just the broader housing conversation in Sacramento, is I don't get to make one rule for Encino and Hidden Hills and Calabasas and a different rule for Reseda and South Los Angeles. And so I think that, one of the things that I talked about with Councilmember Siegel and McCorkindale is there may be opportunities actually to try to restrict some of this stuff from impacting certain neighborhoods, right? I don't think a lot of things that might make sense for most of the state don't make sense for Hidden Hills, right? It's a community of 2,000 people. It's a very different city than most of the cities. It's not Livermore, it's not Stockton, it's not Sacramento. And so thinking about how we might work together to build a little bit of nuance into some of these bills, because the one size fits all, doesn't work for a lot of parts of the state. But one of the reasons I think that you'll see 1120 again, one of the reasons I suspect it will pass is because there is enormous pressure on the legislature to do something about housing and homelessness, and there aren't resources to do it in the subsidy fashion. So people are going to look at things related to zoning. They're going to look at things related to density. I actually think that there's going to be, even a stronger push for density because of wildfires. People are going to say that we can't be building in the WUI. We shouldn't, and I actually think, frankly, that may be good for a lot of folks here, right? Because it doesn't make sense to be putting up a lot of density in places like Calabasas and Hidden Hills that are at risk of wildfires. But they're going to ask for additional density in some of our urban core to address these issues, because that's what's going to be the most important thing to do from a wildfire perspective. So again, I know this may not be what you want to hear, but I want to give it to you straight. I think I owe it to you, and I want you to understand the arguments that the other side is making. And a lot of it is going to be around just the intense pressure that members of the legislature are feeling to address the housing crisis. and the lack of resources we have at our disposal given the current state of the state budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gabriel. That was really interesting, your presentation. I'm going to get moving through the agenda. We have a long one. If anybody has any additional questions for either of the Assemblymember Irwin or Assemblymember Gabriel, please contact their staff. I've been seeing chat line that we're seeing staff email addresses come up. So with that, thank you both for appearing today. I can't tell you how interesting it is to have you here and to listen to what you have to say about these housing bills, because we're kind of only seeing it from our point of view, both just the chaos that was going on up in Sacramento and what these bills mean to you. So thank you very much, and thank you both for abstaining on 1120, and we look forward to working with you shortly.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. I sometimes joke that, you know, you guys have a much harder job than we do, because I know we can do all kinds of really big things on you know, education or the environment in Sacramento, and I won't hear about it, but if you try to move a stop sign in Encino, people will come to your house with pitchforks. So thank you guys for being the front line of all of this.
Thank you so much, and thank you to both of your staff. We appreciate it. Moving on, our next report is an evacuation plan report from Kevin McGowan, Director, Los Angeles County Office of Emergency Management. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for this opportunity to participate in your meeting. So if you remember back to when the recommendations in the after action plan was approved, we had about 80 plus recommendations as a part of the Woolsey after action plan. Within those 80 recommendations, we have about 5 categories: communications being one of them, evacuation, mitigation, response, and what I kind of term miscellaneous, because some of them don't necessarily fit cleanly in those other 4 categories. And with evacuation, you could probably call it evacuation and repopulation, because the 2 are coupled together so closely. And then within the evacuation and repopulation subset, there's about 7 very specific recommendations. And then just trying to give some context to this briefing. Within the evacuation 7 recommendations, there's also some very closely coupled communication type recommendations also. So we have a lot of recommendations that we're balancing. And I want to just run through some accomplishments we've done to date. So my goal in this explanation is to give you all an update to what we've accomplished, and then some of our next steps as we continue to move the ball forward. And I'll steal Supervisor Kuehl's saying, which is, I think we left the last task force meeting saying our commitment is that this will be a living, breathing document, and that we'll work and act on that document throughout this until we all get to a common understanding that we've improved ourselves in preparedness, response, and recovery for future wildfires. And that being said, this is going to be a continued effort for years to come, because some of these recommendations are not going to be actioned immediately, including some of the things within evacuation planning. So as we've been approaching this challenge, obviously this has all been shrouded with also what's been going on with COVID. And then in addition to COVID, what we've been engaged with other wildland fires. So last October, we had a pretty substantial wildfire season. We're already in the throes of wildfire season again. So we're balancing our recommendations and our actions towards improving those recommendations while we're also engaged in real world activities. And so our accomplishments to date, and joining me on this conversation, we also have Captain Becerra and Assistant Chief Drew Smith from Sheriff and Fire respectively. So if I leave anything out, guys, you're more than welcome to jump in and throw in some additional information. So accomplishments to date, we really started with some foundational aspects. So the county's emergency services ordinance went through a complete revision and was approved and adopted by the Board of Supervisors at the end of March. Some specific items related to that was our Emergency Planning Council was expanded to be reflective of whole community. In addition to that, the alert and warning components within that ordinance expanded somewhat. We also have been implementing in real world activities, pre-incident communication and protective measures. So I'll reflect back to the Santa Ana / heat wave event that we just went through last week. And there was a contingent of representatives from county fire, county sheriff, the Office of Emergency Management, animal care and control, who pre-met related to those weather events and then took actions based on recommendations that came out of the Woolsey study, to include reaching out to all of our partners at the city and unincorporated areas, community engagement by way of communications with media, social media, and then the pre-positioning of resources and functions in case an incident were to occur. So for example, the EOC was activated in advance of that, that weather event. County Fire and Sheriff's Department did pre-positioning activities. So those are two significant changes that we've already implemented post this after action. We also have adopted and started implementing the approved statewide evacuation terminology. So if you remember back to the Woolsey fire, we were using mandatory and voluntary evacuation orders. Subsequent to a bunch of fires in 2017 and 2018, there was a lot of discussion at the state and local levels to change that terminology. That Los Angeles County, in a variety of aspects, participated in those discussions, and now the statewide terminology are evacuation orders and evacuation warnings. So if you think of the Ready, Set, Go program, the evacuation warning is the ready and set portion, and the evacuation order is the go program. So we've actually already instituted those terminologies on the recent lake fire up in Castaic Lake area. We use that terminology, and on the Bobcat fire that's currently burning above the San Gabriel Valley communities, the foothill communities, we're using that terminology. However, there's still work to be done on socializing that amongst all of our communities so they're clear on like what those terminologies mean in this new era. We've developed and implemented evacuation and repopulation procedures within our incident management teams. So if we recall back, like when we went into repopulation pre the Woolsey fire, it was through a different process than we're using now. So we continue to work on refining those procedures. So whether a federal or a state incident management team comes in, our local incident management teams already have procedures in place to execute that. We've established an alert and warning task force. That alerting warning task force has met multiple times. It's developing messaging templates and a process ordering form for how we do notification. Once the messaging templates go through their first round of draft reviews from all of the public safety partners throughout the county, which is including the Police Chiefs Association, the Sheriff, the Fire Chiefs Association, County Fire, Emergency Management, Public Health, and Animal Care and Control. Once they go through that revision, then we'll go through a process in revision with all of our stakeholders and partners. There's a couple of products that we've developed that you all can actually take a look at right now if you want while I'm talking. On our website right now, which is lacounty.gov/emergency, you can see a updated in real-time evacuation and fire perimeter map for the Bobcat fire. So that's something that we listened and heard loud and clear from the community and our city and county partners and stakeholders is how important evacuation is in relationship to real-time information and people having access to that real-time information. So we've spent quite a bit of time building a foundation where we have now public-facing accessible information so that when people get those emergency notifications, they can rapidly go to websites, the news can rapidly go to websites and display in visual ways where the evacuation warnings and orders are being issued for in relationship to where the fire activity is occurring. In addition to that, one of the things we heard loud and clear was a lack of information that was readily available related to road closures and safe egress and ingress routes. And so we partnered with a couple of different private sector groups, such as Waze and Google Maps, to build an LA County transportation map that is actively pulling transportation and traffic information, which includes road closures that we can display publicly or internally for decision-making processes on what routes are open, what routes are closed, what routes have heavy traffic, and what routes don't have heavy traffic. That way, when we're sending out emergency notifications, we can indicate to people, hey, view this map and you'll see where the best possible routes for your escape or your evacuation would be. So one of the overarching goals is to really empower our residents and our decision makers with real-time information. I think all of us have learned to appreciate that no one fire is the same. Our representative who led us through the after-action process, Stu from Citygate, has referenced many times during the Woolsey after-action process how the next fire is not going to be the Woolsey fire. It's going to be an animal unique to itself. However, we should take these lessons learned and project forward what the future problems would be so we could get ahead of them. And one of them was this, to empower all of us to have rapid information to make the best decisions based on the variables of that fire. In addition to those real-time mapping programs, we also have a damage assessment program that we've instituted, and this is to help us with repopulation. And as I referenced before, the repopulation and evacuation are coupled together so closely. We figured that it was critical importance to do that. And so if you visit the lacounty.gov/recovery website, there's now a damage map, and it's under the damage inspection button. And you can actually see right now in real-time information the damages from the lake fire. And that's being updated concurrently as the damage inspections are taking place. So a couple of other big accomplishments. The Sheriff's Department has been working very diligently on updating the Topanga plan. You know, Topanga, through an assessment of our entire, 101 corridor, the Las Virgenes-Malibu COG area, Conejo Valley, whatever terminology we want to use for it. And I say this endearingly because I'm a resident of Agoura. The Topanga area is really now one of our most charged and primed areas for a next significant wildfire. So the Sheriff's Department and Fire and OEM diligently focusing on that area, along with everyone in the greater good. But Sheriff has worked on revising that evacuation plan, which is broken up into zones. Malibu has also broken their evacuation areas up into zones, and now those are now coordinated together. So the idea is to build this fabric of zones throughout this entire region. And so this is where I'll leave it with, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, is as we finalize the evacuation zones for the Topanga area, if the cities have done anything up until this date, I'll give you all my email address. I'm more than happy for you to send me any kind of evacuation information or questions you may have. And the next step is to start integrating the other cities through a zone process into that. So now we would have, in the future, a final product that would be inclusive of the entire region broken up into evacuation zones. So with the evacuation zones coupled with the real-time data information systems, and then our improved alert and warning program, we should be able to accomplish all of the recommendations that were set forward in the Woolsey Fire After Action report. So with that, I'm gonna just send it over to Captain Becerra or Chief Drew Smith to see if I left anything out or if they have any additional information they would want to add on to this. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you so much. That was a great report. I'm looking here. Captain Becerra, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, so I want to add, actually, let me backtrack real quick. Let me just give you the state of the station address right here. Right out, we're on 12 No, that's no secret. But our leadership has said that we're not going to stay on 12 and we're not going to cancel RDOs or vacations. That way we don't burn our deputies out that quickly. It's a hard posture to maintain. 12 is very busy. And right now, looking at the activity log, as we speak, we have 2 missions sending half our field force to the Bobcat Fire and the other half to St. Francis Medical Center, where protesters, have amassed to deal with, or to protest the deputies that got shot. To support what Kevin was saying is that Drew Smith, myself, and Captain Forbes, CHP, we've met with regards to this fire evacuation plan to talk about the escape routes. And just to put it in perspective, here's the plan. It's massive. It's detailed. We've been poring over it for months. We've wanted to put it into practice. But some of our partners said, let's wait till the COVID mandates cease a little bit. From my standpoint, I talked to Drew, we can't wait anymore because the game has started. We already got fires going. So as we speak today, tomorrow, and actually for the next 72 hours, we're drilling, just testing elements of this plan to see what works and what doesn't. And speaking with my partner, Kevin here, Kevin made it a good point, and he's right in that part of the learning of the plan was just making the plan, getting everybody involved, getting everybody's opinion. So it's not a perfect plan, no, but it's a plan, and I took it upon myself, and I want to point out that while yes, there is a Woolsey After Action report, I revised the plan because it needed to get done, not because the Woolsey report mandated it. And we're revising all our safety plans. And here's the Malibu evacuation plan. It's a good plan. We're just going to implant it into the bigger plan. And then when I went downstairs to turn on our EOC, we found this. This is the Westlake emergency operation procedures that haven't been updated in 2 or 3 captains. So that'll be one of my priorities, to update all our processes. So it just hopefully it lives beyond me. And I have in my notes, because somebody suggested we talk about Halloween, but perhaps we could talk about Halloween some other time. That's all I have. Drew?
Thank you so much. Captain Smith.
Just a couple on what Kevin and Captain Becerra talked about. We have been engaged with this endeavor since Woolsey, even before Woolsey. So as we all know, this is a living document to enhance. And since we started with even the Malibu plan, that now with their 4 zones that they have, so that is work in progress, which has been amended to the plan that we're currently working on. So with law enforcement being responsible for the evacuations, we work together on those management action points, evaluation points of the fire to implement evacuation, and what portion of the evacuation is time sensitive and critical to the fire start, time allotted to either launch evacuations, to shelter in place, whether we go into the new phrase of terminology and how we're going to do this. It is very orchestrated, and our biggest component that we do is we collocate and communicate so we can implement, and implementation is everything. So we have to formulate what we're going to do, we have to communicate what we're going to do, and then we need to implement what we're going to do. And so us having the great working relationship that we do of standing up the OC at the sheriff's, where we have a desk, the sheriffs have a desk, they have their evacuation notebook. And since Captain Becerra's shown props, so are we here. If you can see, we have a book as well. on if we have a fire in one of the cities or unincorporated for fire operations, it lays it out for those commanders or those people in charge to make decisions on what we're going to do with fire complexity, how we're in unified command, fire history of the area, what city or township it is in. We go to that playbook and see what portion of that is going to come into play at the time of the present fire, given the environmental conditions and the fire spread. So we have met 5 different times, and among ourselves, we've had 3 robust drills, one at Lost Hill Sheriff Station, one at 69 Bravo, and then also another one at King Gillette Ranch. And we brought in our other cooperators into that, which is also the other fire agencies and law agencies, being CHP, Santa Monica PD, LAPD, of course, Lost Hill Sheriff Station, but also our fire cooperators, Los Angeles City Fire Department, of course, us, Los Angeles County Fire Department, Ventura County Fire Departments, Santa Monica Mountains, National Park Service, Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority to discuss, because we also brought in the federal law enforcement and state law enforcement folks with MRCA and also the National Park Service, how they can integrate into the evacuation need, plan, and structure defense needs on what we do. So it was very robust on the law component and the fire component. And we've had very good conversation of bringing all the people that are in a position to have a command element and make decisions on the best interest of public safety based upon the fire progression and spread and what we can do to mitigate the potential loss of life for a fast spreading wildfire. So we are highly engaged in this, and our communication level is fabulous, and the working relationship is very fluid and very cohesive. And that's all I have to add. If there's any questions from fire or even Chief Maroney, who may be on, we'll entertain that.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions of Kevin or either of the captains?
Yeah, this is Stuart Siegel. I just wanted to make one comment to Captain Becerra on behalf of Hidden Hills, and I'm hopefully speaking for all the cities, that we're praying for your deputies. And it is one of the great tragedies, both what's happened to them and the conduct of these people outside the hospital. It's unconscionable. And so you have my prayers, and as you heard at our city council meeting, the entire council and everybody who is attending the meeting give you our hope, and please pass that on to the deputies in whichever way you can.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on evacuation or anything else?
I have a question about the evacuation plan. Did I hear correctly that all cities are supposed to have their community broken down into zones?
So let me clarify that. So we will work towards working with the cities, if that is the preference of that particular city, to develop zones that are built off of the zones that we've already created for Topanga and Malibu. So Malibu has created zones that are now numbered with the zones in coordination with Topanga, and we will work with each of the cities to develop that. The idea being that came out of the after action report is that we are trying to be consistent across the board of all of the cities in the region, so that when we're communicating with the public, it's not in a very segmented way, but in a unified or, a formatted way across the board.
Great. Okay. Will you, you'll send all the contact information so we can set up a meeting to discuss that for our own community of Calabasas?
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
And for Flora Hills as well, Mr. McGowan, if you wouldn't mind. Also, I had a question, just a follow-up question on the zones that I had written in my notes. But how soon do you want the input?
I mean, the sooner the better is the loaded question, or the loaded answer, right? I mean, the reality is this, and Drew and Captain Becerra and I are seeing this on the fires that we're working right now, is this is the process we're using in real time. So even if something isn't done in the preparatory phase right now, we're working through incident command to develop zones. So for example, on the Bobcat fire, the evacuation branch was stood up immediately. And the very first thing that was done was develop evacuation zones. And those zones corresponded with alert and warning. So, you know, I say that to say that if a fire started this season and we don't have these plans already all, you know, buttoned up and blessed, that's okay. Like, we have a command structure and we have a procedure and a process in place to address these things in real time. Now, obviously, the more preparatory work we do, the better, you know, I shouldn't say better, the more efficient some things can run on the front end. And so, you know, I don't want to put like a time frame on this call to all that. I can work with myself and our partners. We can work with each of the cities to kind of look forward at what those timeframes would look like for each of the cities. Because like I said, when I was briefing out from the contextual standpoint, one thing that I think is very critical for all of us is to realize that all of these recommendations are intertwined for success. And we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, because if we focus only on evacuation, we're going to miss some of the other critical aspects that we need to devote resources to also. And so I'll touch base offline with everyone more on like individual city levels through our disaster management coordinators and our county partners to figure out where we look at timeframes for those zones. Knowing that that's kind of the long-term objective, is that we have zones for the greater region.
Thank you. And lastly, I see that Terry Dibble wants to weigh in, and so does City Manager Kalman. Hey, would you mind, Kevin, putting in the chat line the two real-time websites that you sent us to at LA County? I tried to go to it and I lost something. So if you would, thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Dipple.
Kevin, I appreciate you being on. One of the things that I've been trying to coordinate, and hopefully now that we're communicating better, you can help with that, is for the last 6 months, I've been trying to get the county to reach out to the cities so we could meet and hear this information from you or from the county in a setting where it's city staff, and then they can, you know, discuss it internally and get back. One of the things that seems to be is that your office is working with the sheriff's department, which obviously is important, and fire department, which obviously is important, but the input from all of the cities is critical in this. And I think that's what's missing in this process.
I hear you. We're committed to working through it. You know, I think one thing that's unique is, you know, with the Lost Hills Station and so like LA County Fire and LA County Sheriff and the cities that were impacted by Woolsey are all one big family in that sense, right? It's a little bit differently when you have full service cities with municipal police departments. And so I hear you loud and clear on like city staff being engaged. As from OEM's perspective, the sheriff's station at Lost Hills is an entity of the city. Drew Smith and Los Angeles County Fire are entities of the city because they're providing that public safety first line services. But I also understand that they are also a county family too. What I'm hearing from you, Terry, is the need for increased engagement with other members of city staff. And I'm more than happy to continue doing that. This is a great opportunity. I do apologize on the 6-month component. Obviously, when COVID kicked off, you know, a vast majority of the emergency management, and I say that collectively, not just the Office of Emergency Management, but the weight of emergency management for the entire county became highly focused on, you know, the needs of the disaster that was occurring at the time. So you know, we're at a point where we can engage in this level, and I commit to that, Terry.
Thank you.
Great, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. Also, Mr. McGowan, I'm just wondering, I know that my city council would like to hear from you. Are you open to doing a presentation at one of our meetings about the evacuation?
Yeah, I'll touch base through Terry, and I'm available to go to all the city councils and brief city councils or work with the city managers and figure out whatever is the best way to continue moving this ball forward. I'm willing to work with you all on that.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I saw Carrie.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to follow up on what Terry said, and Kevin and Drew and Chuck, I appreciate you being on this call, and I'm happy but surprised to learn of all the work that's been done. And I want to reiterate how important it is that, yes, we are partners with our sheriff and our local fire, but when Woolsey happened, our sheriff and local fire were not in charge. So it's all great for them to be working with us, but when it's different people coming in and we're kept out of the loop, and I know you were there, and I know you heard a lot of the after action comments come from the cities, and there was a lot of information, but one of them was about communication. So to sort of reiterate on the last 5 minutes of this conversation, it's really important for us to be engaged early. We heard it from our legislators that they said they needed to hear from us. Well, we're saying the same to you. We need to hear from you. And to follow up on the zones and evacuation, I would suggest to Terry and the rest of the COG that, some of our cities, while we all have staff dedicated to emergency management, we don't have the resources dedicated to create zones and evacuation zones and plans. So it might make more sense for the COG as a region, rather than us to all come up with our own zones and then try to stitch them together on the fly. Maybe we can all work together through our staff to kind of make sure this is all getting stitched together ahead of time. So it might be something to talk about at the TAC level and some considerations, going forward. But Kevin, really, I would love to have you talk with me and one of my staff and with our council when I feel you guys are ready to share information about all of this. So I thank you.
This is Reva. I just wanted to jump in and just share, that the city of Malibu took it upon themselves to develop the evacuation zones. I think we're in a really different situation than all the cities over the hill, because we're 21 miles long, and, our main ingress and egress is going to be Pacific Coast Highway. So it was something that we felt, really it was necessary to do in zones. I don't see the zones as significant for the other cities as they are for Malibu. So, the reason we did it was because of the way we are in geographically. So again, it was something we took upon ourselves, working with sheriff and fire and the community to develop.
Thank you, Reva. Anybody else? Otherwise, it's getting late and I would move on with the agenda. And so what I'm hearing is that, Kevin, you'll make yourself available and you can coordinate with Terry and either appear at a TAC meeting, and we can eventually set you up to come to all the city councils to report on the evacuation centers. So anybody else have anything further on evacuation, or are everyone ready to move on?
I have one more comment, Mayor Buckley Weber.
Sure, go ahead, Captain.
The comments were brought up about communication or lack thereof. I want to assure everybody that Drew Smith, Captain Ford from CHP have been meeting constantly, probably every 10 days, maybe even 20 days. We've already held tabletop exercises because we know Topanga is a hotbed, but fires don't recognize jurisdictions or boundaries. So the big Topanga plan I showed you, we're putting the Malibu mass evacuation plan within that plan. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping to have a similar plan for all the cities in one big plan. Speaking with Kevin yesterday, Kevin and I are going to meet once a month, maybe even sooner, starting immediately. So that way we're all prepared, or as prepared as we're going to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain. Okay, so let's move on. Our next item, a Metro update, is being continued to our next meeting. Mr. Najarian wasn't able to participate today. So let's move on to the Executive Director's report. Terry?
For the, I know that we're pressed for time right now, and so I would call your attention to my Executive Director's report. I'll just highlight a couple of things that that are more critical. The first one being that I was hoping to have the COG's 7th year Measure M project list available in September for review by the city managers at the TAC meeting, and then the approval by the governing board at this meeting. However, with COVID, we ran into some communication difficulties and scheduling conflicts that resulted in this item having to be postponed 1 month. I've already discussed it on several occasions with Metro. It's not going to affect the timing of the 7th year funding that becomes available to the cities in 2023. But I just wanted to let you know that this item is still being massaged and will be presented to the city managers in a couple of weeks and then to the governing board next month. The other items very quickly is one of the priorities that the COG mentioned again at our goals setting in July was the issue of broadband. And I wanted to call your attention to a conversation that I had with Supervisor Kuehl's staff and learned that she did not support the South Bay cities in their request to get Measure M funding for their broadband project. And I know that Supervisor Kuehl has been very instrumental in supporting the COG cities with allocating funding from Measure R and Measure M for various projects. And to be very candid with you, I'd like to stay on her good side. And so we would be looking at alternatives or alternative funding to pursue this in the future. And so it's something that I'll continue to work on, but I just wanted to let you know that we're going to have to pivot from using Metro funds to looking at other funding sources. And then lastly, quick item, the COG's insurance, liability insurance was renewed. And then Gabriel and I are making the rounds to the various COG cities to present an overview of how the COG funded Gabriel's position, and Gabriel presenting an overview of his activities on a weekly basis. So that's been very well received so far, and looking forward to rounding out the other meetings by the end of this month. And with that, I'll just again call your attention to my report so you can check and see if there's anything else that you're interested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on now to member cities reports on COVID-19. Let's start with Agoura Hills.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll try to be brief here. We're just not a ton of changes operationally for us. You know, we are dealing with a lot of businesses, I think, that have kind of reached the end of the rope on the restrictions and reopening process. And we're working with them through a variety of different ways to try to help them, you know, get outdoor activities, other opportunities for them, you know, to do business. You know, I think we'll all start to see the real true economic impacts coming up in the next, you know, 3 to 4 weeks as we start to get all our sales tax reports and TOT reports in. So we've been working closely with the Greater Conejo Chamber of Commerce, as well as our finance staff and our council to kind of take a deeper look at those things. And then finally, the last thing that we've really been working on is preparing for the election, although it's coming up, just working with the county to find locations for voting centers and ballot drop-offs. We were able to accommodate one in our civic center and assisting them with that. So with that, I'll try to, like I said, keep it brief, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Calabasas?
Yes, good morning and greetings from the city of Calabasas. It's nice to see everyone this morning. I will also be very brief, not a whole lot to report. I would like to tell you that We're not receiving any face mask complaints, but we continue to receive them, unfortunately, albeit the numbers have dropped off, which is a good sign. I would also note that we've not had any large gatherings that, at least that we know of, and complaints along those lines, which is a good thing. We are also, effective this week, I modified our flexible work schedule for staff, and we're now asking all staff to be in their respective offices at least 8 hours a week. And that's very flexible. And we're asking our staff to work with their respective supervisors to address that. And then finally, I would note that the city is finishing up its small business grant program to help local businesses here in Calabasas during this period of continued shutdown. And a little over $100,000 was allocated by the council and by the city a week or so ago. So we're finishing up on that program. And with that, I'll ask Illece if she has anything that she'd like to add for Calabasas.
No, I think you covered it with my mask. I think you covered it. So I'll let the next city go.
Great. Let's move on to Hidden Hills.
Yeah, I'll continue the trend and be brief. I think the parties moved from Calabasas to Hidden Hills. We had a very large wedding party last week that has caused a lot of hurt feelings. Very frustrating when county health puts out rules and then gives you no tools to enforce those rules. And then I will also say that we've talked with Calabasas a little bit about this, and I know it's been a conversation, this private school phenomenon. We had a private school attempt to open up in a house. We were able to shut them down, and that was a good thing, but again, hurt a lot of feelings. And then finally, as it relates to Halloween, I think we're going to continue to hurt people's feelings, but we're working with our HOA on what should be a very exciting car parade. So I think we're all in the same boat, and it's just nice to always connect with everyone and hear what they have to say. Stuart,
Can you share the Halloween info with us as well?
Once we have it, you got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Stuart and Laura, did you have anything to add?
I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to Malibu.
Good morning, everybody. As usual, unfortunately, I can't say that things are quiet in Malibu. We had probably the busiest summer that we've ever seen. We get a count from the county lifeguards of beach visitors. So this is visitors just going to county beaches. It doesn't include the state beaches and other areas within the city. And we exceeded the August numbers by over 500,000 people. So it's just been inundated with people. We've been inundated with car clubs and car shows and motorcycles and just everything of any lawlessness. We are definitely seeing it. Chuck can certainly attest to the type of crimes and tickets and whatnot that we're seeing. So trash has been out of control. So it's just been very, very challenging summer for us. We have a core group of people at City Hall. Every time we've tried to bring people back, we've had an outbreak of somebody testing positive, and that's sent a whole slew of people home. So I just give a word of warning to my other fellow City Halls. Be careful there, because with the contact tracing, if one person gets sick and they've had any contact with anybody for 10 minutes, then all those people have to go home and quarantine for 2 weeks. So we have found that it's just better to keep people working remotely at this time. Last night, our city council meeting went till 1:15, so Karen and I are here barely, but we did consider a mask ordinance under an urgency ordinance that need to pass by 4/5 vote, and it failed by only getting 3 votes. So we will not be moving forward with any type of fine structure on masks, but hopefully people will wear them, which they're not. but that's another story. So I think that's all I have. You know, like everyone else, worried about our budget. We did lay off a handful of people at the last through the last council meeting, and just continuing to do some belt tightening and making sure that we can withstand this time. So Karen, I don't know if you have anything that I might have missed, but that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Reva. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, we are seeing super spreader events every Sunday in one of our shopping centers. I can't even remember the name of it, Malibu Village, I think. It's the one where the movie theater used to be, for anybody who knows that. The center owner does not want these events. The tenants don't want them. And hundreds of people and cars are showing up, hanging out Sunday mornings from approximately 8 to 10 a.m. And when questioned about being there, they're giving answers like, oh, we're waiting for a table at Marmalade. You know, Marmalade doesn't seat 600 people or whatever we're seeing there, 1,000. So yeah, it's very discouraging. I checked it out myself a few weeks ago. I saw one person from Malibu that I recognized. I've lived in Malibu for 43 years, so I think if this were a Malibu event, I would have recognized more people. And we don't need that kind of event. It's not helping anything. It's not helping our businesses. I think the only thing it's helping is the virus. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Reva, can I just ask you a quick question? You said 500,000 people have been at the beach. Is that, in what period of time?
No, I'm sorry. In the month of August alone, this year we had 1.7 million visitors, and the same time period last year we saw 1.2 million visitors. This is just for the month of August. So okay. That's an additional 500,000. Additional 500,000 in that month alone. I mean, in an annual time, we see about 15 million visitors. And obviously, you know, July and August are typically our big months, but we've never seen numbers like that. So it's just, we're overwhelmed with humanity.
That's an overwhelming number. Okay, let's move on. Thank you to Westlake Village.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I'll be brief as well. You know, things are relatively quiet in Westlake Village. I think, you know, we've got a lot of cooperation from the community, which we appreciate and thank them. We've been on a campaign, one small ask, please wear a mask, and you see that messaging all over town. And mostly we get good cooperation, so appreciate that. Hope that continues in the months ahead. We Shop Local campaign, supporting our business community is critical. Doing a lot of work there. The council recently approved extending the outdoor eating and outdoor commerce through January. And so the business community is supportive of that. City Hall still remains closed, in-person appointments, and we have staggered schedules. We have such a small staff, we're able to have some people here, but again, it's sort of staggered schedule. Last thing I wanted to mention is it's not COVID related, but we have a long time employee retiring, Audrey Brown. She's been the assistant city manager here at Westlake Village for the last 20 years. And she's just a great person. And she's still here for a couple of days. So I know many of you know her. If you want to shoot her a line and congratulate her, please do so. Thank you. Kelly or Ned, anything to add?
Yeah, double that on Audrey. Tomorrow is her official last day with the city of Westlake Village. And I know a lot of you know her. So, you know, it's a big day for our city. She's been there a long time. So, and I also just wanted to reiterate that as far as the census goes, Westlake Village is in first place. I mean, not that I'm competitive or anything, but you know, we are in first place in our district. We're over 80% now. So just saying, that's all.
And on behalf of the city of Agoura Hills, we're very well aware that Westlake's in first place.
Now, not that, you know, not that it really matters to me, but I mean, you know.
We need to step it up.
Yeah, so with that, we are now done with the information items. We're going to move on to public safety, legislative, and agency partner updates. You know, I'm going to try and go through it quickly because I know we're over time. Let's start with Captain Bissara. Do you have anything more than what you already told us today? Is the captain still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, great.
So nothing that we can't talk about in the next 2 weeks. Or I'll just brief on Halloween at our next COG meeting.
Our next COG meeting isn't until October 20th. Anything real quick that you want to tell us about that? We know that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to draft an emergency action plan, and we're going to anticipate that whether the governor opens the cities or not, that we're going to have crowds to deal with. So we're going to anticipate the crowds and plan along those lines. So we have 7 weeks until Halloween. My staff is pouring over the data, trying to figure out what they can do. So we're on it. And then as soon as we have the EAP will be finished, let's just say 10 days before Halloween. We can send it out and we'll talk to our city partners.
That's great. Thank you so much. And just so you know, Captain, Haunted Hempstead in the city of Agoura Hills has been canceled. So I'm sure I know you've had to put extra people out there for that. And so you can talk to Nate about what needs to be done, but that is canceled. Okay, moving on to Captain Smith. Did you have anything further? Is Captain Smith? All right, well, let's move on. If he comes on, we'll go back. We're going to go to Jeff now for League of Cities, if you're still with us, Jeff.
I am still here, thank you, and I will be brief. I just want to mention, of course, I hear you all on SB 1120. It looked like I wasn't paying attention. It's because I was taking copious notes. I'm sending all of that information up to my colleagues in Sacramento. It's something that I've been harping on for quite some time, so they are aware that the region that I represent is not happy with the league's position on that. And hopefully we can figure out a way to work on something together next year. I know that, I think Assemblymember Gabriel said it best. We expect this bill to pass when it comes back up. So tinkering with the details and making sure to engage early on something like this coming forward next year is really going to be important. I'll only just mention that the annual conference registration is open. I just got the list this morning and was looking. I see a number of people already registered. Of course, it's all virtual this year. It looks like that is going well. Registration is actually about the same as it would be for our in-person conference. So that's good to see. And then, obviously the annual conference and the resolution that takes place, cities do have to come up with a voting delegate that requires action by the city council meeting. So I just want to flag that for you if you haven't done that already. We ask for that information to be submitted by the end of the month, but obviously we can work with you and get those names submitted later for the voting delegates that will take action on the one resolution and the potential petition resolutions, which may happen this year, since it's all virtual and a little bit easier probably to get that finished. Otherwise, we're working through the heat, the power outages, the air quality, and the fires. I know I was out last week, but we'll be working on sending out more information to everyone about some of the updates that are going around that. So happy to answer any questions about this or legislation as well.
Thank you. Any questions of Jeff? Okay, seeing none, and I'm sure that Jeff would make himself available since we're running out of time. Anybody can contact him. We all know how to reach him. Moving on to updates from agency partners. Do we have any? I'm not seeing any. Let me just say for the record that we did have on the line, or still do have on the line, we had Jeremy Wolf from Senator Stern's office. Nancy Frawley is still on the line from Assemblymember Irwin's office. Aurelia Friedman was on the line from Congressmember Liu's office, and she has put a lengthy update in the chat room if everybody can take a look at that. Tessa was on the line and still is, Tessa Sharnofsky from Sheila Kuehl's office, and Maria Chon Castillo is also on the line, and Timothy Littman was online, all from Sheila Kuehl's office. So thank you to everybody for being here with us. If you have any questions, just go ahead and contact them directly. The next item on the agenda is the lobbyist proposal, number 7A. I would suggest that we continue this to the next meeting. I think it's a very important issue and something that time has already been spent on. And I think, we're already losing people. I know that Mayor Weintraub already had to get off the line. And I think it's important enough that we all be here. Unless somebody feels that we should move forward with it today, let's hear what you have to say about it. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to continue it. Yes, Laura.
I think that would be great. My one suggestion would be, so that we don't end up with this in November, the lobbyist firm that you and Kelly selected as a lead potential for the COG, I think they should be at the next meeting, and we should at least give them 15 minutes in addition to our discussion to provide information for all of the board members as to what they think they can do for the COG, what they can't do. We were having a lot of discussions, I think in the last meeting too, about money and a lot of little pieces of minutia without even having the benefit of a presentation. And having spent a lot of time with the two guys that you guys selected, I think it would be worthy of 15 minutes of our time to hear them out at the next meeting if we're going to continue this. So combine both.
Just a comment. Yeah, Elise and Laura. We didn't select anybody. We just
just your the two you had recommended, I gathered.
Yeah, we just interviewed two people. We rejected one of those people and we liked the second person, but I'd like to interview a third person. And I don't have a problem with continuing this to the next month, but I do want to interview one more. I'd like to interview the guy from Quintana. I'd just like to hear what he has to say. And maybe, I don't know if Elise wants to do that or the city managers do, but, I remain optimistic about this. In other words, we've heard from our legislative representatives in Sacramento that,
Kelly, can I just interrupt for a minute? Are we going to have a discussion on this, or is somebody going to move to continue it?
I'll move to continue it. I don't want to have a discussion. I think we should remain optimistic about this. That's my comment. So I'll move to continue.
Then bring whoever you like to speak, but we need to hear from them to discuss this with any wisdom.
I hear what you're saying.
What I would need is a motion and a second to continue it. And if somebody wants to add to that motion that they want a potential lobbyist to be at the meeting, include that in your motion.
I move to continue and to bring the potential lobbyist candidate to the October meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second by Stewart.
Thank you. I'll run through the list then. Let's start. Mayor Honig.
Aye.
Mayor Siegel.
Yes.
Mayor Weintraub, I believe she's no longer on. Okay, Karen Farrar.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
And Elise Buckley Weber, aye. So that motion carries 4-0, and the record would reflect that Mayor Weintraub is no longer with us on this call. So with that, that's going to be on our October 20 agenda. And future meeting comments and requests for future agenda items. Does anybody have anything? Seeing nobody raising their hand, let's move on to future meeting dates. Technical Advisory Committee is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, 8:30 a.m. Governing Board meeting is Tuesday, October 20, 2020 at 8:30 a.m. If that's it, if I can go to adjournment, a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Stewart.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That's a second from Kelly Honig from Westlake Village. So we have a motion and a second. Let's run through Kelly Honig.
Aye.
Karen Farrar,
Aye.
Stuart Siegel,
Yes.
Alicia Weintraub is no longer with us, absent, and Elise Buckley Weber, aye. The motion carries 4-0. And so this meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time.